are more open to this information, like I mentioned to you before from my contacts in the Ukraine and the former Soviet Union. They told me directly we were discussing the aggressive pursuing of these UFOs and the fact that we had shot at them and what have you. And he wrote back and told me that there had been a system-wide command given out to the Soviet forces already a long time ago, 20 years ago, that they would not pursue or shoot at these vehicles. And one of the political people and several high-ranking officers who disobeyed the rule were court-martialed because of it. And I have noticed that they are much more open to the information and the reporting of that information, which was in fact one of the emphasis of the meeting with those scientists in 1989. So I believe when the Chinese get there, I think they're going there for a very definite reason. The Japanese every year put $10 million aside for research into construction of lunar facilities, which they wouldn't be spending the money if they didn't plan to go there either. So I think that a number of countries will be interested to go there and get the information from themselves, because up to a certain point there has been only one clearinghouse for space information, and I think they're looking for a little bit more.
Okay, let's go back to the phones. Let's go west of the Rockies. Welcome to Coast to Coast. You are on the air. Hi there.
Hey, how's it going? My name is Jake, and I'm calling from Eugene, Oregon.
Hi,
great show, you guys. Great show. Just wanted to ask you a few questions, Glenn, if I could. First question is, now, you said that these structures that you're talking about, they are visible with a fairly decent telescope, or does it require some kind of filter to see more definition?
Well, Jake, there's several methods of magnification to use when you use a telescope. You know that the higher the magnification of the lens, let's say you go from a 20-millimeter lens, which gives you a lot of light and a lot of viewability, to a 9 or 7-millimeter lens, which is highly magnified, but it lets in a lot less light, so actually makes it harder to view under those conditions. And of course, you have the atmospheric disturbance between the Earth and the Moon and everything else involved, so sometimes you get distortions. But if you use a lens like a Barlow lens, where you can use a wider magnification lens and then double its power, you still are incorporating the same amount of light being let in. So yes, indeed, to answer the question, there is a possibility of using ground-based telescopes, and a large number of individuals do that and train themselves on certain areas of the Moon. There was the Alpine Valley that so many astronomers, amateur astronomers, reported lights moving along the ridges, along the valleys, along the surface from many different angles, many different times. So yes, that is visible with your own equipment.
Now, my next question is, thank you for answering that one, by the way, but my next question is, now, are these structures that have been talked about, not necessarily the ones that have actually been seen by people on Earth, are some of these on the dark side of the Moon? Do we even know what's on the dark side of the Moon?
Well, the dark side of the Moon, of course, is not susceptible to the intense gravitational pull of the Earth. And so the backside of the Moon has a much more stable environment as far as maintaining surface pressure, and there is some talk that, like in Death Valley, the deeper you go, the denser the atmospheric concentration. The same would be in a crater. If you went down 2,000 or 3,000 feet in the crater, you would have greater density or accumulation based upon that depth as well below sea level. So the backside of the Moon, a large number of photographs were taken of Tycho and Archimedes and many other areas on the backside that have shown even greater activity. And there has been some speculation that since we were aiming rockets and lasers and things at the Moon, that some of these constructions were actually moved to the backside. And Cassini crater was one of those, namely that area. Greater Cassini, with the 1930s shot from the Mount Wilson Observatory, showed a huge array of tubular constructions along the bottom of the crater, leading through the outside of the crater and continuing on the other side. Taking pictures of it 20, 30, 40 years later, you see these starting to decline, and actually some of them disappearing. And so there's speculation that for their own safety sakes, whoever has these particular constructions find the backside of the Moon to be more environmentally friendly in many aspects.
Do you believe that the shadow government, what some people also call the Illuminati, Glenn, might be behind what's going on there now?
Well, as to particular organizations, there have been many different labelings of who this may be, and consortiums of different power structures and what have you. I would say that there are decisions made on many different levels. We look at our elected officials, whether it happens to be in the House or Congress or sitting in the White House or what have you, and we see this as the ultimate apex of decision-making. But there are areas, since the governments are inherently bureaucratic, each one defends and defines their own structure as much as possible. And, of course, you find arguments between the two. But you have men of power, men and women of power, that are belonging to organizations that make decisions that are more of global consequence versus than what we consider to be the petty public aggravation of what we see today in the newspapers.
Let's go first-time caller line. Welcome to Coast. Hi there.
How are you this evening?
We are fine. Thanks.
This morning, should I say. My question, Glenn, do you think that there's a possibility that the moon, let's say about 1 million years or so ago, could have been very much like the Earth, and that something happened like a thermal cooling of the core that could have caused the moon to die?
Well, that depends here. We're talking in the realm of the theories at this particular moment, and there's still open questions on whether the moon was ejected from the Earth at a certain point or whether it was captured at a certain point, and that still having the source unknown, we would be very difficult to formulate an answer to that question. It would be difficult to say, since it's been in the gravitational influence of the Earth, then it doesn't have complete rotation, and so we're talking about the forces with the core of rotation and gravitational security and things like that. So the geophysics are different with a lunar body versus a planetary body. So I would have to say that at this point, the best we could hope for is to look at the theories and hope that the data we get will give us an answer at least to the beginnings of this particular period, and then we can build from there.
Yeah. But just kind of hypothetically speaking, if a planet that had a core, very much like the Earth, if that core was to cool rapidly, making major changes, would that cause a planet to physically die?
Absolutely. In fact, if anyone watched the NOVA program this evening, talking about a magnetic storm was the name of the program. It was very fascinating. It talks about the geophysical alterations of our particular planet, the shifting of the poles every 100,000 years or so, and the fact that it is a very measurable slowing down of the magnetic sphere of influence and cooling of the core, which leads to the alterations in the planet. And we know, logically, over a period of time, nothing lasts forever, and there is a cycle of building as well as there is a cycle of destruction, which is really not destruction because the molecules will be re-energized and formed again, but we won't be here to see it.
Have you seen the movie The Core?
No, I can't recall.
Great movie about the fact that the core stops moving, and they have to go down there and try to fix it, and they get it jump-started again, but it's interesting theories.
Well, there are some things that are not theory. There are scientific bodies who have measured that every time we explode an atomic device, not only do we get the resonance, as that one lady mentioned about that ringing sound, which actually Dr. Wilbert Smith talked about, the project director of Project Magnet at one point, but also there is a measurable slowing down of the planet's revolution. Now, it doesn't take rocket scientists to realize here that the balance between the spinning of the core in opposition to the rotation of the planet creates the environment of balance upon which we live. When we start with our ludicrousy